Hey guys, it's Francine Simone, and I am here with the YA Hype Book Breakdown. This is a series in which I only review hyped YA books, and we analyze them like you would any other type of text to find out whether they are high quality or low quality books. Now, I know a lot of you are very skeptical on whether I can objectively say that a book is high quality or not, and I'm going to tell you why I can, the reason for this whole thing, and why it can be true. So no, I don't think that I'm some bougie bitch who knows everything. I'm just saying that I have broken this down into three things that are quantifiably objective as far as a quality story goes, and how everything else is subjective and based on preference. But as long as these three things are in line and they are authentic, the book is a quality book, whether you like it or not. Those three things are character authenticity, plot authenticity, and world authenticity. Now, I want to go ahead here and define authenticity for those of you who don't know what I mean when I say that. Something can be authentic and relatable, but something can be relatable and not authentic. So by authentic, I do not mean relatable. Also, by authentic, I do not mean realistic. For instance, fantasy is not realistic. However, a fantasy novel can be authentic. So by authenticity, I mean that a character's motives are based on past experiences, past memories, and preconceived notions, whether it's prejudice or not. And take note here, authenticity does not mean that the character only does good things or that they are moral people. This means that they do whatever it is that they are meant to do based on their preconceived notions, their experiences, and their view of the human condition. For world, that means that the world is viewed as the character views it. Even if it's third person limited or first person or even second person, though I feel like that's really tricky, the world is going to have a lens over it based on the character's experience and the character's perspective. And as far as plot goes, an authentic plot means that it has nothing to do with the author's motivations or needs to get the character from point A to point B. It means that all of the character's actions, their consequences, whether they were good, bad, or benign, have led up to this plot event, even if it's an external plot, because we're dealing with how the external plot relates to the character or how the character reacts to this external plot. That is what I mean by authenticity. Authenticity is AKA life. So we're going to get into the Raven Boys, and I'm going to break down why I gave this book about 3 stars on the authenticity quality level, and I'm going to use textual evidence because you should never take my word for it. You should always look and analyze for yourself. So let's jump into it. So I'm going to talk about the world first because it's very short and it's very good. I honestly thought that the world was high quality. It's contemporary with a bit of supernatural elements to it. However, based on the writing style and the narrative voice, which is almost like a character in itself, since we got a lot of the perspective of the world through that narrative voice, it really grew it. It was luscious and it was authentic. Because there are so many different POVs in the story, we don't really get any different perspectives on what the world is like for each character so much, except for with Adam. But overall, I think that, even with that might just be my personal preference there. I thought the world was really developed well. So let's move on to character. Our 3 main point of views and our 3 main characters were Blue, Gainsey, and Adam. Blue didn't really have much going on except for the people around her. We'll get into that. Gainsey felt like the Great Gatsby. We'll get into that too. And Adam? He was actually pretty authentic, and he had lots of internal struggle that I thought really worked well for this story. And we'll get into that. So first, Blue, this is actually really short. In the very beginning, we're introduced into her perspective and the narrative voice. And the narrative voice is extremely luscious. It's really good. It's really interesting. If this entire story was told through Blue's perspective with that narrative voice, it probably would have turned out to be an amazing 5-star book. From the very start, it was so dark and atmospheric and interesting. We see her life with her family who is full of psychics, and I thought, wow, this is how she sees the world, and I'm telling a lot about her from how she sees the world, how she sees her parents, how she sees Henrietta, Virginia, how she hears the dogs always barking in the background. She's a very interesting character in what she takes notice of, and how she chooses to describe the people around her. However, as soon as the next point of view was inserted in, when we got to see how Adam thought, and then we got to see how Gainsey thought, I realized that the narrative voice didn't change with the other characters. The narrative voice was the same for Blue, Adam, and Gainsey. And the problem with that is it left all of Blue's character out the window. She became extremely flat. She had nothing going on for herself. It's the narrator who is deciding all of this. So where does that leave Blue? Well, we start looking at her internal struggles. From the first page, we find out that if she kisses her true love, he's going to die. Now, that may seem really tragic to a lot of people, and I think that's a great way to start a story. However, as we go through this story, well, one, she doesn't really seem to care that much about it. And then two, this is a very external thing. This is something that psychics have told her. It's a prophecy. It's not an internal struggle. I mean, it's not like she decided that once she kisses her true love, she's going to stab him in the neck 5 times. It's not something that she decided. But the way she views love isn't very complex, and it doesn't really get delved into when this is something that's supposed to change her life forever. I mean, Jesus, if you're fated to somebody, well, then who's the next fucker she's going to meet? Is she going to be destined to be with destitutes and low lives for the rest of her life because her one true love is gone? Like, damn, that's some shitty ass shit, right? But I understand, she's 16. She doesn't really have to think about all that. But if we move away from that and think about her other internal struggles, which revolve around friendship and parental conflict. With friendship, I mean, this bitch don't got no friends. One of my favorite lines in this book that had a lot to do with her friendship was actually this: but the problem with being weird was that everyone else was normal. That was one of the poignant moments I had connecting with her because, well, one, I found that relatable personally because I'm really weird and it doesn't bother me to be weird, but a lot of people are normal and I just can't deal with that. I can't deal with normal. I can't. I'm sorry, y'all. Bye. There was a really very specific and poignant idea that got across really well. She was comfortable with herself. So this isn't going to be a girl that has some type of internal crisis of who is she supposed to be, right? Now that's okay, but the problem with Blue is she's not coming to age trying to figure out who she is. Then what else is there to look at? Well, we see her rebel with her mom a bit, but her rebellion was based kind of on freedom. Her mom tried to stop her from being free, something she's always been. And the end result of that rebellion felt more like a disagreement between two adults that was left to simmer for a little too long instead of a stance and a shout cry for freedom, you know? So that was very mellow. Everything with Blue was extremely mellow. She was pretty much left without a personality, even though she was supposed to be weird and eclectic. And it was mainly due to that narrative voice. Again, if we only saw everything through Blue's perspective, that would have changed everything because then that luscious narrative voice would have been hers. So really quick, let's move on to Adam. I thought Adam actually was the most interesting character in this book because he's the only one who had an internal struggle that started, grew into something, and resolved. Funny enough, Adam really reminded me of Aaron Burr. For you Hamilton fans, woo, woo, woo. Seriously, he was really envious of Gainsey because Gainsey was wealthy. He grew up with sophistication. I mean, this kid can do essentially anything that he wants to do at a drop of a dime. Whereas Adam grew up in a trailer park. Well, it's double wides now. But this child, I mean, he's exposed to domestic abuse. The most anybody ever hit Gainsey was with a bee, and he fell out like he was going to die. So talk about two completely different extremes. However, Adam is actually really happy to be the great Gainsey's friend. This reminds you of Nick, anybody? Nick from The Great Gatsby? He really enjoys being around him in his, greatness, I guess, if that's what you want to call it, because it's something that he wants for himself. He wants his own rags to riches story so he can be rich like Gainsey. However, he is also extremely envious of what Gainsey has, and it comes out as very prejudiced. He's extremely prejudiced against Gainsey having money. Most of these people are. I mean, Gainsey uses words that he grew up using, and all of a sudden he gets condemned for it. Or, I ain't no prostitute. Girl, nobody called you a prostitute. I was just trying to come up with a solution. I'm sorry I have money. And Adam is usually the instigator behind that. And I found that very interesting. And I found that growing seed of jealousy was just beautiful. It was poignant. I mean, it was a bit overdone sometimes. I'm not going to lie. But it was there and it was very authentic. So, woohoo, 5 stars goes to Adam and his trailed through authenticity. Now let's talk about Gainsey. We get his perspective a lot, and the problem with him is I found him to be a great Gatsby. And he's a lot of flair, a lot of pizzazz. He's got this huge thing going on in his mind. He's finding his own greatness, his own search for being something that's bigger than himself. And Gatsby was kind of like that. I mean, he got kind of swallowed up in the facade of it all. But Gainsey has that kind of sparkle to him. And the problem is that that's a very flat character to write on the paper his perspective of with no internal struggle. And Gainsey has essentially no internal struggle. He has a lot of doubts and fears, sure, but he doesn't work through these things. He's essentially just consumed by the research and kind of by his friends' problems, the problems of the people around him, and being sad that he can't throw money at their problems to fix them. So this created a very shallow character, and the reason why it worked in The Great Gatsby is because we don't get Gatsby's point of view. And see, when you're dealing with someone who's very sparkly like this, and it's all based off of other people's perception. Think about it. In The Great Gatsby, people were consumed with the perception of Gatsby, what he did, who he was. With Gainsey, it's the same thing. People are consumed by the perception of him. And the thing about perception is when you actually look in the mirror, that person, when they're looking in that mirror, they don't see that. They see something completely different, and they have internal struggles just like everybody else that they work on. And the thing is that with Gainsey, the great Gainsey, he ain't got no internal struggle. The thing that would have saved this would have to knock out his perspective all in all, because this external thing that he's working on, looking for the Welsh King, looks like a search that a 12-year-old boy does in the back of his woods looking for some treasure. Like, it's not great, that plot line. It's not the end all be all. He ain't bringing the ring to Mordor. He's looking for a buried dead man. Salamon Sam, who is that? I don't even know who that is. But whoever was up in Mordor ain't coming to burn down this town just because Gainsey can't figure out what a ley line is. And that's a huge problem with these characters, is they're treating this silly kind of plot line, this external thing that's going on with this Welsh dude, as an end all be all, and it's not. The only time that you can have an end all be all and have the characters just focus on that is when it gives, again, the end all be all. If someone else is going to die at the end, like, if you don't do it, people will die. Like, if Blue is obsessed, like, oh my god, I need to find out a way to save Gainsey, that would have worked. That's her end all be all. She don't want him to die, especially if she fell in love with him. Like if Gainsey was like, if I don't find this Welsh dude, the whole world will crumble into bits and pieces, and, you know, hell will open up and swallow us all. That's an end all be all. That's like serious shit. And then, you know, we can see their growth throughout that, and it doesn't have to be heavily focused on their internal struggle. However, when you have a very small external plot, you need very big internal plots, and then the big internal plots becomes your main plot. So let's move on, because I'm going to talk about the internal versus external a little bit more when we get to the plot section of this. So as you can tell, the plot really melds in a lot with the character here, because as I told you, the internal struggles and the external didn't really match up, and that was my huge problem with this book. Like I said in my previous video, there are like so many different subplots going on in this story that they're all fine. It's just, they don't really get resolved, and they don't really work for the ending of this story. And I'm going to say here, there's going to be spoilery stuff from here on, so if you still want to read it, go ahead and pick it up, and you can come back to this video, or just, you know, peace out, bye! But let's talk about some spoilerly stuff for the internal. Like I said with Blue, her internal plot was, what, the kiss and friendship and family conflict. There was no growth there. There was no room, no resolution. I mean, she was just hiding in a tree at the end of the book. And then she buried some bones on a ley line, and she was all like, I'm part of the boys now. So I guess she made friends, but that's about it. It was really like, why was she even there? As I said with Adam before, excellent, full through, authentic, right? So now you throw in, spoiler alert, Welk is turning this external plot into an end-all be-all. If Gainsey and somebody else doesn't wake up the ley line, he will. And he's evil because he put a gun to Gainsey's head and he killed Noah. And he's a crazy bastard. But it's like, is he really? He's actually a very inauthentic character. I mean, he has no reasoning behind all of his crazy. And really, did he let this hobby turn him into a murderer? Like, does he believe in the ley lines that much? But that very loose character is not something you want to stand your entire external plot on top of, especially have a driving motivator. Neve, on the other hand, would have been much better because this bitch looks like she's crazy. I mean, she's talking in demon tongue and all that stuff, talking about, ooh, who are you? I can't see you. And all sorts of weird shit, looking into puddles of water and all that stuff. Now, if she turned out to be somebody who had some ulterior motives or was working with the devil or whatever have you, I really don't care. She would have been a much stronger person to stand it on, especially since she was interested in it. Still, Neve doing this isn't necessarily an end-all be-all unless she's trying to open up the gates of hell. That's an external thing that nobody wants to be a part of, right? So then we need to wake the ley lines. But we need to wake it because Welk's gonna do it, and he's a bad person, and he wants to use it to make money. Like, morally, okay. But that's still fucking weak. So now that we've talked about these two different types of plot lines that she is going, and then let's talk about the fact of how she ends it. She resolves it with that external weak plot. And the problem with that is this book is heavily moved and directed by the internal struggles of the characters, whether they're mellow or not. I mean, it's a slow paced book. It's not end all be all again. They're not jumping through hoops trying to keep the devil from eating everybody alive. They're jumping through hoops trying to be teens, kind of, in extravagant ways, and Gatsby's being, Gatsby over there. And so it's going very slow, and it's just moving through personal stuff and very character type stuff. And then bam, plot stuff. It doesn't work. It's very imbalanced. The only way to balance that out would be, like I said, if this was an end-all, be-all plot. And end-all, be-all plots is what starts series. Internal struggles are standalone books. So I felt 50 pages to the end of this book, I was like, how is this not a standalone? It's very character-driven. I don't see how you can make a series out of this weak thing that they're doing here. That's like if Stand By Me was like, okay, guys, let's go look for more dead bodies in the wood. You'd be like, nah, y'all already grew and found out something about yourselves. That's it. Stop trying to make sequels. This one felt the same way to me. Because again, something that is internally driven that is a standalone. And a series is made by end-all be-alls. Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, Hunger Games. End-all be-all plots. Some type of force, external force, creating doom. And this person either has to act or not act. And whether they do or not, this is still going to eat everybody alive. You get what I mean? Whereas internal struggle, you can't not resolve it at the end of the book, right? What was the point of the whole fucking book? You can't be like internal struggle, series, internal struggle. No, internal struggle solved. That's it. Now the only exception to that is this: the world has to be big enough or fantastical enough to promote another story. For instance, in this one, Adam's internal struggle, he turns out to be like a betrayer, He might as well have shot Gainsey. I mean, Jesus. Because essentially he took what was Gainsey's purpose in life. Almost. I mean, they could still go find the Welsh guy, but waking up the ley line, that was kind of his thing. And he took that away from him, and, he's got his own agendas and motives going on there. When you look at something like that, he had an internal start where he was envious. He grew. That little seed of jealousy and green turned him greener than the Cookie Monster. He's blue. Anyways, he grew, and then he had a resolution. He made a decision, and that was to betray his friends, kinda, and to do something that wasn't really his to do. What happens after that? Well, it depends on if there's the world big enough to take on that idea. Now, you might be thinking, but it is. I mean, I read the other books, and they're great, and all this other stuff happens. No, I'm going to tell you why that's not right. First of all, we should never have to read another book to find out that the world is big enough. There should be hints of that world in the first book, right? 2, this world isn't big enough. The only thing left to do is for Gainsey to wake and find the Welsh king. And is that really interesting? Again, what does it have to do with anything? It's not like if he doesn't do it, somebody's going to die or terrible things will happen. It's not like if he does do it, terrible things are going to happen or he's going to save the world. It's just something he wants to do. I want to go see Hamilton on Broadway, but that ain't going to stop nobody from living their lives, right? That's not affecting anybody else. That's not a big world. That's still a very small thing. Overall, it's still very fucking weak. I mean, there's Ronan with the weird bird shit and stuff, but as far as I'm concerned, that's all very small, strange stuff that's been inserted that if taken out of the story would not affect the story at all. So it was inserted to make it interesting, to make it seem like there was a bigger world. Because at the end of the day, this story lacks a strong external plot that pushes it. It lacks the end-all be-all that makes it into a series. So at the end of the day, I feel like this was a heavy 3-star book. It was pretty good as far as how it tried to do a lot of these things, but at the end of the day, it still didn't accomplish it. So the quality level is low. Now, personally, whether you like the story, whether you find the plot intriguing and all that stuff, that's a personal thing that has nothing to do with the quality of the story. Because again, I'm backing up these kinds of points with textual evidence versus my opinion. Opinion-wise, I really enjoyed reading the writing. The narrative voice was amazing to me. I really enjoyed it. I was just disappointed because the plot and everything like that. I mean, I was with it. I was like, it's perfectly fine, but don't try to sell me on more books about this. Like, this ain't nothing. Like, this ain't epic. Epics or series. What I think would have brought this book to the next level of quality is if Stafford's developmental editor would have said, hey, I need you to think about this. Either drop the other perspectives and put it through one perspective, either that be Adam, since he's the best one so far, or Blue, because you know what? There's nothing wrong with a book seen from the perspective of someone who isn't special. I personally really enjoy those kinds of story. Or Adam, seen through the perspective of someone who betrays the other people around him. Or Gainsey, seen through the perspective of someone who's on a mission to do something, and has internal struggles along the way that bother him, or change the plot of the book to be something end all be all, and then we don't even have to see a deep internal struggle, but we can see how his actions are affecting the people around him and how he changes internally because of those things. That drops the subplot and makes it a part of the main plot. And at the end of the day, that point of view, that one point of view, would mean that that narrative voice is working for the story and not against it. Because whenever you have a narrative voice and multiple points of view and the narrative voice is the same, it does work against your story. It disconnects the reader from the characters. Because now I'm being told the story. I'm not living this story through somebody's perspective. I also would have wished that someone would have said, hey, look, if this is going to be a series, you need to make this an end-all be-all, or the world in general needs to be more fantastic than what you're making it right now. Because if it's fantastic, it's a world people want to explore, and then we can explore the character changes that happen in the next book and how, this affects everything around them. Or you need to make this a standalone, because this book is set up like an internal struggle standalone, but you didn't follow through on that. So those are the two main issues of this book that I really wish somebody would have told her, because that would have really brought the quality of this book up tenfold. And I mean, these are kind of like minute changes, except for the end-all be-all thing that really does change the plot a lot. But, the villain, we're not losing anything if we lose him. So at the end of the day, is it a story that we deserve? It's not the best. It's not the worst. It really is right there in the middle of the pack when it comes to quality. I think this author has a lot of room to grow, and I think that the developmental team has also a lot of room to grow when it comes to pushing this author. But as an example of a book that is high quality in this genre, I'm going to say The Ghost of Ashbury High by Jacqueline Moriarty. This book has supernatural elements, but is it a contemporary? And it's a part of a series of standalones, quite like Anna and the French Kiss has 3 books, but they're standalones. This book, it does have all of the main characters from other books, but it's like year 4 or something like that before graduation. But it also has big internal struggles in it, and all of the it's very character driven, even though it's fantastical with its supernatural. It's a different kind of mood. So if you love the brooding atmosphere and the southern Georgia or the southern Virginia thing going on, I would not recommend this because it's not the same thing. This is set in Australia and it's actually very sardonic. So if you like that sort of thing, do pick this up. But this one is something that I think really plays well on what I'm talking about with internal struggle as a standalone with supernatural elements. But then again, this one also has a world that's so vivid and so beautiful, even though it's contemporary, that you would want to pick up the other ones in the series just to visit the characters again as they continue growing. So this is a book that actually does both quite well. Even though the world isn't end-all be-all and fantastical, the world is rich enough that you want to keep exploring it. So shout out to Jacqueline Moriarty, because I mean, this chick is kick-ass when it comes to poignant, high-quality stuff. Now, guys, this is the end of it. I hope that you see what my process is and that I'm not just like trying to bullshit through my teeth and say things like reading is objective. There are subjective points to it and objective points, and I hope that I've kind of proved that to you today and that you actually had fun watching me analyze this. I mean, let's talk about it down below. If you disagree, that is perfectly fine, because that is a part of analyzing and discussing text, is that we see things from different perspectives, we talk about it. That's something that I want to encourage. So leave some comments down below if you felt completely different about this book. But let's make sure to keep it not opinions, but discussions. Not your opinion. I need you to be bringing up some facts. Be like, nah, because, bitch, look, Adam said this, and then Blue was like this, and then I was like, that's right, Gainsey is a player, and that's why this is a problem. Like, I need that kind of stuff. And if you have any suggestions on what books I should do, which hyped books I should break down and analyze. Please leave them down below. Please give me lots of them. So just throw me your list, man, and I will go to the library because I don't buy them books first. There are too many low quality books for me to buy. But send me your suggestions or tweet me, and have a good day. TTYL. Talk for now.